Hello everyone, the Disney 3D Art YouTube channel, nice to meet you again. Today's video it will be the character Heffalump from Winnie the Pooh. Heffalumps are semi-antagonistic elephant-like creatures which first appeared in Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, the second segment of the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh, in Pooh's dreams. Unlike the Woozles, Heffalumps become friends and allies to Pooh and his friends. One Woozle that befriends Pooh and the others, a Woozle named Wooster. In the original A.A. Milne books, Heffalumps are depicted as figments in Pooh's nightmares. In the first book, as Heffalumps are eating honey within his dreams. Pooh becomes deeply distressed and wakes up to find that it never truly happened. In the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh, a very similar instance occurs after Tigger introduces both Heffalumps and Woozles to Pooh very shortly after they meet, though the latter does attempt to correct him. Because of Tigger's words, Pooh stays up throughout the night guarding his honey. After hours of staying awake, he lulls to sleep, in which, much like the first book, he dreams of Heffalumps, and, this time, Woozles as well. In the beginning of the dream, Pooh floats out of his body and flies down to the ground as Tigger's voice tells him that Heffalumps and Woozles steal honey. He lands in a dreamy area, still asleep, when suddenly a group of singing honeypots, the same pots he fell asleep guarding, appear and warn Pooh to beware of the Heffalumps and Woozles. Pooh listens to them until, to his surprise, they just as suddenly vanish. As Pooh looks around for the pots, which are continuing to sing, they reappear and begin chanting that he must beware. Pooh gets scared by their sudden reappearance and runs away from the honeypots. Pooh runs off, looking behind him in case the honeypots are following. Up ahead, a large green and yellow checkered Heffalump is bending over with its face to the ground. Pooh, still looking behind him, runs right up the Heffalump's trunk and smacks into its face, landing on top of the Heffalump's trunk as it stands up swiftly, launching Pooh into the air. The Heffalump bats Pooh away, transforming into a Woozle as it does so. The Woozle's head then turns back into a Heffalump's head, but the body remains that of a Woozle. The Heffalump smiles mischievously as the scene zooms in on the Heffalump's eyes, which merge together and turn into a blue and pink Heffalump, which then splits into two Heffalumps. The two Heffalumps look at each other, wink, and then multiply rapidly to create a large group of Heffalumps before the scene zooms out to show all the Heffalumps are designs on the shirt of a large male Heffalump with an umbrella, a hat, and a yo-yo. As the fat Heffalump plays with the yo-yo, the smaller Heffalumps on his shirt dance, then suddenly vanish and he collapses, transforming into a smaller Heffalump in a red shirt, much like the shirt Pooh wears, as he stands back up. The Heffalump then lifts up his hat and becomes a Woozle, who waggles his eyebrows at the viewer, and then suddenly turns into a blue pot of honey, which begins to bounce when the fat Heffalump collapses. His umbrella and the yo-yo both fly out of his hands and off screen, but the hat just flies up and lands back on the Heffalump's head. And when the Woozle becomes a honey pot, the hat then lands on the pot, acting as the pot's lid. Pooh runs over from the left side of the screen and skids to a stop in front of the bouncing honey pot. He picks it up and holds the pot happily, then notices the bouncing. An instant later, a transparent Heffalump head, filled with honey, appears out of the pot, revealing that the bouncing was caused by the Heffalump eating the honey. As it does so, the hat, which was acting as the lid, is placed back on the Heffalump's head. Pooh stumbles back in surprise and falls down, pulling the Heffalump down with him. The Heffalump manages to take a gulp of honey as it falls but flinches as Pooh hits the ground. It then happily resumes eating the honey as Pooh watches. Pooh stares at the transparent Heffalump as it eats. Though it started as just a head, after only a few gulps it has grown a full body, which begins to swell rapidly as it continues to eat the honey. As the Heffalump reaches what seems a normal size, Pooh looks down at the honey pot, likely to see how much honey is left, as the Heffalump continues to guzzle up the pot's contents, still growing as it does. When Pooh looks back up at the Heffalump, it has grown extremely round, nearly filling the screen, and is still growing. Pooh starts to check the honey pot again, but as he does so the Heffalump takes one gulp of honey too many and explodes, sending Pooh, the hat, and the honey pot flying. Pooh tries to hold onto the pot but loses his grip as the force of the exploding Heffalump launches him away. We see a beautiful female Heffalump and male Woozle skip rope while showing off their powers. They first change their colors. Then the female Heffalump turns into a ball while the Woozle turns into a square. The jump rope vanishes. They both stand up and glare menacingly at the screen, then tie themselves in knots. They then untie themselves and change their patterns as they pose, the Heffalump making herself striped as the Woozle covers himself with polka dots. The honey pots warn Pooh to beware again as Pooh tries to hide from them. Pooh ignores the warnings of the honey pots and tries to run away from them, but then stops in surprise. It turns out that Pooh has almost run into a parade of heffalumps and woozles. The woozle bandleader grows his brown nose bigger and the yellow mouth attached to the brown nose stretches while the nose keeps growing until it explodes, being turned into a flute. The bandleader woozle then marches as he plays his new flute nose. Then, a beautiful blue female heffalump wearing a red hair bow and a pink tutu walks behind a walking honey pot, flapping her arms as she walks. She takes the lid off the pot, but it starts to laugh crazily and stumble around, and she slams the lid back on, then continues following the pot. 3 woozles and a large heffalump with a tuba for a trunk march behind the bandleader woozle. The tuba heffalump accidentally steps on the tail of one of the woozles, who falls over. And before he can stand up, the heffalump stomps first on his bottom, then on his head, squishing him. Pooh walks along happily, carrying a honey pot, most likely the one he took from the transparent heffalump. A bee-like heffalump flies right behind him, buzzing loudly in tune with the music, but Pooh doesn't even notice her. She taps Pooh on the head with her trunk, and when Pooh turns to look at her, she grabs the honey pot from him and flies off, continuing to buzz. Pooh chases the bee, buzzing 3 times, but falls down and is laughed at by a trio of Jack-in-the-Box woozles. The Heffabee, happily holding the honey pot with her trunk, although you can't even hear her buzzing for once, dives to the ground as a spotlight appears and disappears, creating a lake of honey. Just after the Heffabee swims under the honey, 2 heffalumps, who emerge to the surface. A beautiful female with a red hair bow and a lavender tutu, and a handsome male with a tuxedo outfit and a top hat covered themselves in honey for their romantic swim. They look at each other covered in honey, and the female heffalump bats her eyelashes at the male as the honey covered them wears off. They fall in love with each other and begin to dance with each other on the spotlight appears and focuses on them. While another beautiful female pink heffalump wearing a necklace and a light blue hair bow plays a harp made of honey on her tummy. And a woozle rope charmer with a turban plays a flute and makes a rope come out of a large honey pot. Pooh comes out of the pot and climbs up the rope. When Pooh gets to the top of the rope, Pooh and the woozle notice each other at the same time and Pooh leans over to see the woozle's flute. However, the woozle begins to blow the flute in Pooh's face. Pooh seems to realize what the woozle is about to do as he blows the flute at him the second time and tries to back away. But the woozle blows the flute for the 3rd time and makes him disappear into a puff of sparks. The scene shifts to a pair of young male heffalumps with yellow eyes, possibly twins, apparently wearing collars as they use their trunks as accordions. The dream then shifts away from the lake of honey to a stormier-looking area. A small flying heffalump sees Pooh walking past with a red pot of honey, laughs, and dives at him, but instead smashes into the ground behind him and transforms into a larger heffalump in a military uniform with a pop gun for a nose. The heffalump marches behind Pooh, who doesn't notice him, then crouches down, shaking his bottom in the air, and sucks in his trunk as he takes aim. Then he shoots Pooh in the bottom with his pop gun. Pooh goes flying. The lid flies off the pot, but Pooh holds tightly onto the pot itself. As he flies, he ends up getting the honey pot stuck on his head. He bounces off the ground and continues flying forward until he flies into the trunk of another heffalump, this one with a stick of dynamite on his head. The force of Pooh flying into the heffalump's trunk causes the heffalump to flinch and close his eyes as he goes skidding backward. Pooh's bottom is too big to fit, and he gets stuck in the heffalump's trunk with only his bottom and legs sticking out. The heffalump looks at Pooh as he kicks wildly, trying to get out. But as the heffalump watches Pooh's attempts to get free, a uniformed woozle marches over from behind the heffalump and pulls out a large matchstick, banging it on the ground and then twirling it until the heffalump notices him. As soon as the heffalump notices the match, the woozle places the match on the end of the heffalump's trunk and slides it into the heffalump's face, lighting the match. The heffalump closes his eyes to avoid the fire, then opens them and looks for where the match went. The heffalump looks upright as the woozle lights the dynamite on his head. He squeezes his eyes tightly shut as the woozle tosses the match aside. The woozle leans in to check the fuse of the dynamite, opening his eyes as he does so. He sees the fuse burn up fully, panics, and runs away. Pooh continues kicking in an effort to free himself, but the dynamite goes off, blowing up the heffalump. Pooh falls to the ground with the honey pot still stuck to his head. Pooh tries to pull the pot off his head, but it covers him with honey as it transforms into a hot air balloon heffalump. The honey turns into the balloon's basket and carries away Pooh, who fruitlessly tries to grab hold of the ground. The balloon carries Pooh into the sky, where a number of other Heffalump balloons are. All the balloons have empty honey pots attached to them in place of baskets, including Pooh's balloon. Except for a green Heffalump balloon right next to Pooh's balloon. This balloon notices that its pot is full of honey, smiles widely, and begins to eat the honey. Pooh, however, actually noticed the Heffalump's honey even before the Heffalump did, and was staring at it almost as soon as he could see it. As the green balloon happily eats the honey, Pooh tries to grab the pot of honey from it. Realizing he isn't very strong, Pooh jumps over to the green balloon. He barely makes it, managing to grab onto the pot and hang from the side. His added weight pulls the pot down, preventing the Heffalump from reaching it. Thunder and lightning flash as Pooh hears the voices of the singing pots again, warning him once more that the Heffalumps and woozles are everywhere. As Pooh looks down and around at all the Heffalumps and woozles, the balloon whose honey pot Pooh is holding onto begins to swing wildly back and forth, attempting to shake Pooh off so it can resume eating the honey. But right as it seems Pooh is about to lose his grip on the pot, the balloon shrinks and vanishes in a flash of light. Before Pooh can react, the balloon is replaced by watering can Heffalump. Pooh tries to grab onto the Heffalump's trunk to avoid falling, but the Heffalump douses him with water. As Pooh falls from the sky, an umbrella suddenly appears next to him. He grabs it and floats down, until he lands back in his body and wakes up from his dream to discover that his house has flooded with rainwater and somehow never mentions his dream to any of his friends. Heffalumps are not mentioned again until the first season of The New Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. In the episode There's No Camp Like Home, Piglet also shows deep distress while experiencing a Heffalump and woozle-induced nightmare of his own. After reluctantly going camping with Tigger and Pooh, he soon meets a family of Heffalumps who, while obsessed with honey as past Winnie the Pooh literature and animation suggests, are not necessarily evil. This and the next episode they appeared in, Trap as Trap Can, suggest that not all Heffalumps are to be feared, though the extreme desire for honey still remains evident. When the episode The Great Honey Pot Robbery was released, we're introduced to another Heffalump named Heff, who, much like the Heffalumps depicted in Pooh and Piglet's nightmares, is a villain who chose to associate himself with a woozle named Stan. After the appearances of the Heffalump family and Heff himself, actual Heffalumps are not seen again in any Winnie the Pooh animation, except as intimidating figments. As seen in Tigger's song sequence in Boo to You Too, Winnie the Pooh, a Halloween special that aired in 1996. While they are indeed mentioned by the main characters in other Pooh works as well, none are physically seen. In 2005, Pooh's Heffalump movie brings Heffalumps back and are not only physically seen, but, as the title suggests, they are the main focus of the film. In the film, Pooh, Piglet, Tigger, Eeyore, Rabbit, and Roo are introduced to Heffalumps. They fear them as strange creatures with fiery eyes and tails with spikes. They are initially intimidated by an innocent kind-hearted one named Lumpy, but Roo becomes friends with him. After a misunderstanding, the others soon warm up to him as well, introduce him to Christopher Robin, and are soon seen interacting with other members of the Heffalump community. Lumpy continued to appear in Winnie the Pooh media, including Pooh's Heffalump Halloween movie and in a semi-regular role in My Friends Tigger and Pooh. First is draw the body of the elephant, then draw 4 elephant legs for Heffalump. Next is to draw the elephant head, then decorate the face and draw 2 elephant ears for Heffalump. Don't forget to draw the trunk. Finally, draw the hair of the elephant and draw the elephant tail for Heffalump. So the character Heffalump from Winnie the Pooh has been completed. Please like and subscribe if you watched to the end of the video. At the same time, Download the app and go to the website DisneyStore to shopping online, as well as Disney Plus to watch some movies and TV shows for free to use by many people of the world. We'll see you again tomorrow, so thanks for watching and goodbye everyone.